that the sun shines down its power to all the world and makes the wind blow strong as it will. So lovely earth can stay lovely still.
Hello everybody, this is Energy Week with George Harvey, me, and Tom Fennell, the
Hello,
famous
everybody.
Tom Fennell, world traveler and philosopher, electrical engineer who's worked on transmission lines all over the world, or at least in some places. Every day I get up early and I go to the internet and I look for news relating to climate change and energy, mostly energy. And I find 10 to 15 items. Each item I put together a synopsis about 50 or 55 words long and a link to the original article, and I package these together and put them up on my website, geoharvey.com, geoharvey.com. You're welcome to come look at it. And every week on Thursday morning, Tom and I get together and talk about the 20 or so items that are among the most interesting there.
The best of the blog.
The best of the blog. And so that's what this show is. We start from a week earlier. So today being the 27th of April,
We start out with the 20th.
We start out with the 20th. And I know you're not watching this probably on the 27th of April because it isn't broadcast until later. We're just recording it. However,
some of these articles are very interesting and in-depth.
Some of them are amazing.
But we don't have the time to talk about them. So if you see something, and I'll try to call to your attention a particularly good one, look it up and read it, because not this one coming up, but the one after that is very much in depth.
Yes. Well, the first one we might as well just jump to, and this comes from Wind Power Engineering.
We got a picture coming.
We have a
here.
picture there of Lake Tahoe.
Pretty place.
Pretty place. This is a summertime picture of Lake Tahoe. Most people who go to Lake Tahoe don't know what it looks like this time of year, and it's pretty, no question about it. From Wind Power Engineering.
Alrighty. South Lake Tahoe makes a 100% renewables pledge.
South Lake Tahoe, California, became the 26th municipality in the U.S. and the latest in a growing coalition of communities to commit to 100% renewable energy. The City Council approved a measure that sets a goal to switch entirely to renewable sources of electricity by 2032. Winter tourism is the region's leading industry, and
well, that's the key. That's what's going on here.
that's what they're worried about.
Very large, $12 billion.
Billion.
You know, this is a good one.
Yeah, and these people know that with climate change happening, and anybody who doesn't believe in climate change isn't paying attention to the real news. They're paying attention to the alternate news, which is funded by people who are going to be injured if the world takes climate change seriously. So,
well, what's happening is there isn't enough snow,
and
that $12.2 billion is coming from skiers.
And this is going to affect Vermont. It already is affecting Vermont.
Been,
We've had a decline in our skiing industry. We've had changes in the maple sugar industry.
It's moving north.
Vermont used to be the biggest producer of maple syrup in the world, and now it's
Quebec.
It follows Quebec. It follows
Pennsylvania's catching up.
I think certainly Wisconsin has got a bigger industry than Vermont.
Interesting takeaway on this one. By the end of the century, it's estimated that only 6 of the 19 cities that have hosted the Winter Olympics will be cold enough to host another one.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. And we've had pictures of, ski area in the Andes where it used to be a glacier there.
But there's nothing there anymore.
There's nothing left. It's just
rocks in an old ski lodge.
Yeah, and there are people who say that they believe that climate change isn't happening. And, there are people who are funding their opinions because they're going to lose money on it. Anyway, I think we should probably go on.
I think we should.
Okay, to the Bulletin of Atomic Scientists, for which we don't have a picture.
No, we don't. We'll put us back up there.
Put us back up. That way people can see what silly people we are.
Fusion reactors not what they're cracked up to be. And this is one of those very long and interesting articles that really goes into it.
The writer says, having worked on nuclear fusion experiments for 25 years at the Princeton Plasma Physics Lab, I took a look at fusion once dispassionately, and I concluded that fusion reactor is far from perfect and in some ways close to the opposite.
That's interesting, because they've always been played up as being the future.
Well, you know, they say we've got an infinite supply of fuel for this. Yeah. And it's easy to believe if you think that these things are powered by water, but they aren't.
They're not really.
They're powered by...
water's part of the equation.
Yeah, they're powered by deuterium oxide, which you can find in extremely small quantities in water. And it's extremely expensive to get out, and it's, you know, like $3,500 a liter to buy the stuff. But the other thing...
It's more expensive than scotch.
It is.
Yeah.
But it's also fueled, the other half of the fuel is tritium oxide, and although tritium does exist in nature, it exists in the smallest trace amounts. You have to manufacture it to get it for the fusion reactor.
And you need a reactor to manufacture.
You do, and it costs literally millions of dollars a liter. So this is not water. This is expensive water. You've heard of heavy water. This is expensive water.
Heavier than heavy water.
Heavier than heavy water. That's right. And you don't want to drink it, but you know that's okay.
So, as they say, it's not what they're cracked up to be. And reading into the article, it doesn't look like, even if they are cracked up to be, we're going to see it in a short period of time at all.
They've been working on this since the early 1950s, and they have. It's only recently, in the last few years, that they've been able to get a fusion reactor to the point where it could generate more power than it uses to run it.
Yeah.
Which is kind of like saying, I've invented a power source that cost $4 billion, and it can turn on a light bulb.
Bingo.
So
that's progress.
So what?
Well, you know, way back when, 40-odd years ago or so, I was living outside of Princeton, New Jersey.
Yeah.
And one of my friends worked at the Princeton Plasma Physics Lab.
Yeah.
That we're talking about here.
Probably knows the guy who wrote this article.
He probably does. And I said, you know, this is wonderful, what you're working on, you know. What we really need is a Manhattan Project to get this thing front and center. And he said to me, Manhattan Project isn't going to work. There are steps that have to take place one at another.
One after another.
And you can have the biggest project in the world, and it isn't going to speed these things up because A has to happen before B.
Yep.
And that was 40 years ago?
Yeah. And we're still working on it.
Still working on it.
You know, and...
He's probably retired by now.
Yeah. Okay, should we move on?
I think we can.
Our next item is from SF Bay.
San Francisco cuts greenhouse gases faster than planned.
San Francisco reached an ambitious goal to reduce greenhouse gases locally 2 years ahead of schedule, according to city officials. Recently compiled figures show the city's overall greenhouse gas emissions had fallen to 28% below 1990 levels by 2015. The city's goal, set in 2008, was to hit 25% below by 2017. So it's way ahead of schedule.
And in addition, the city's population has been increasing, and the gross domestic product of the city has been increasing.
Yeah.
Which would tend to increase the activities of greenhouse gas.
Yes.
And they're going the other way.
They're going the other way. And I see this over and over and over again. The goals for greenhouse gas emissions have turned out to be, over and over again, much easier to reach than people envisioned.
Well, we're making a lot of progress in renewables.
Yes.
I mean, we as the world culture is making progress in renewables.
We're making progress in technology. We're making progress. I mean, here, look, this little computer.
Yeah.
This thing, literally, I plug it in with a watt meter and discover that it's drawing 5 watts when it's charging. All right.
That's almost too small to count, isn't it?
It is, really. You know, it is very, very
run
small.
On flashlight batteries.
Yeah. Well, you know, but unlike earlier computers, it is also very much more powerful. But it's not just computers. It's like we've got LEDs that use a quarter of the electricity that incandescent bulbs do, and they last for a very, very long time. We've got a whole series of products that produce high enough efficiency that people are switching to them because they're cheaper, not because of greenhouse gases.
That's what's driving this, really.
A lot of it is
economy.
Yeah. Although, you know, people ask me, if you're so convinced that we're going to be able to deal with this, why are you working so hard to stop climate change? There are reasons. We're losing another species about every 10 minutes.
And there's, how would you say it, organized opposition.
Yeah, there is. And air pollution, we're losing another person, human being, every 10 seconds. You know, if you think about it, that terrorist attack in Paris last year, in 217 minutes, 137 people were killed. In those 217 same minutes, 1,380 people, approximately, almost exactly 10 times as many people were killed by terrorists in Paris. 1,380 people died from health problems relating to outdoor air pollution.
You don't ever even hear of that.
Well, doesn't it make you think that maybe, you know, there are industries in this world that are advertising saying that climate change is not happening and that fossil fuels are safe, who are possibly guilty of crimes against humanity? You know, I can think of a couple names of people.
It wouldn't be too far of a stretch.
Yeah, I can think of a couple of names of people who I think really ought to be tried for crimes against humanity and maybe locked up. Now, we are up to April 21st.
And we got a picture coming up here.
And there it is. For anybody who wants to see it, right behind us. Up, right in front of us.
If you look very, very carefully, directly over that causeway, way up at the top, there's a picture of a man staring down.
A man staring down? What are you talking about?
It's in the clouds.
It's in the clouds?
Yeah.
You're kidding me. I don't see it.
Directly over the causeway at the very top of the picture.
I don't see it.
Okay.
Okay, go ahead, Tom.
Must be in my imagination.
Maybe it is.
Now, we've talked about this before.
Yeah, we have.
But this is a different aspect
This is a different angle.
Shellfish growers poised for lagoon show.
Don't you love this? The Swansea Bay Tidal Lagoon is projected to cost 1.3 billion pounds, which I'm going to guess is about 1.5, 1.4 billion dollars, and generate enough electricity for 155,000 homes over a lifespan of, get this, 120 years. A report from Sea Life takes a different look at it. Prospects for cultivating mussels, oysters, scallops, clams, cockles, and seaweed in the proposed project are promising, it says.
This is interesting because we weren't talking about this before. We were talking about tides and we were talking about generating electricity.
Yeah.
But there's a side market here. Somebody's looking at that and saying, hey, you know.
There's a lot of money to be made.
There's a market for all these species.
Yes, including laver bread.
Laver bread?
Yeah, that's seaweed. This is what's called Welsh caviar.
Oh, okay.
That's what Richard Burton said, and he was Welsh. This is from thefishsite.com. And by the way, we are on April 21st, so you can go to the April 21st entry for geoharvey.com. When you go to geoharvey.com, if you want to go to this entry, click on the date and it'll take you straight to it.
Fish site.
Thefishsite.com.
Yeah, that's the one. By the way, that's $1.7 billion.
1.7.
Yeah.
So I was way off. Oh, I was doing euros instead of pounds.
Well, when I was a kid, $5 bill was nicknamed a pound.
Yeah.
And now it's...
And shillings, there were 20 shillings in a pound.
Yeah.
A shilling was a quarter.
A quarter, right.
Yeah.
So?
Yeah. Okay.
Something's happening in
our
Britain.
next item is from Wind Power Engineering. And this is stunning.
I got one from, okay, I'm skipping one. Yep.
You're skipping one.
EOS, Energy Storage, taking orders at $95 per kilowatt hour for their DC battery system.
This is astonishing.
I have a hard time correlating
Yeah.
kilowatt hours in batteries.
Yeah,
versus
I think a lot of
kilowatt
people do. Pricing batteries in kilowatt hours is like pricing oil delivery trucks in terms of the price of oil.
That's a good analogy. It is,
You know,
really.
I mean, this is if the price of oil is $2 a gallon, then a 5,000 gallon oil truck is going to be a 10,000, a dollar truck. No, it's not. It's going to be $100,000 or more than that. And you'd say, okay, well, if it's 5,000 gallons and it costs $100,000, then that's $20 a gallon. That's high for the price of oil. Well, we're talking about batteries here, which is like talking about oil trucks, as opposed to talking about electricity, which is like talking about the oil. The EOS Energy System, producer of the low-cost Zinth battery, announced new forward pricing for the company's EOS Aurora DC battery system. At a record-breaking low cost, the company is taking orders for volume purchases at a price of $160 per kilowatt hour for shipment in 2017, but it is taking orders for $95 per usable kilowatt hour for shipment in 2022. This is from Wind Power Engineering. And the figure that I remember reading was that when the price of batteries hits $200 per kilowatt hour, this is going to be
A game changer.
disruptive to the grid, because people are going to say, well, this is so cheap that we can store renewable power cheaper than we can make electricity using coal or natural gas.
In some places, that exactly is happening.
It is happening. There's no question about it. And this is kind of, well, the $95 an hour in 2022 reminds me of the story of the guy who went to the fish store where they advertised lobster for $1 a pound. And he went in and said, could I get some lobster? And the guy said,
we don't have any.
We don't have any. And so he was walking down the street and he came to the next fish store and he said, could I get some lobster? How much is it? And the fella said, well, it's $12 a pound. And he said, down the street, I can get it for $1 a pound. And the fish store operator said, why don't you buy from them? And he said, because they don't have any. And the new fish store operator said, I sell it for $1 a pound too when I don't have any. I'm a little reminded of that here. $95 for delivery in 2022 is a bit of a stretch.
That $95 is about 30% lower than the lowest projected cost for any competing storage system.
Yeah. This is cheap.
Things are happening.
$160 per kilowatt hour is now. That is today.
That's a good price.
That's an amazing price. I think that may be cheaper than pumped storage, which means that storage for renewables could happen anywhere, where with pumped storage you at least want a mountain or a very tall building.
Yeah, you need some vertical height there.
Should we move on to the Rutland Herald?
This is a little bit closer to home.
Now, a little bit closer to home, we have a nice picture of an array, which is...
It's a well done array, isn't it?
Yeah, it's
not
a pretty
a very big
thing.
one, but
no, not big.
Yeah. I wonder where it is.
That's at the Vermont Law School.
Oh, is it?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Now, where is the Vermont Law School? I forget the name of the town.
Waterbury?
No, it's not Waterbury.
Montpelier?
No. It's along Route 89. And I just forget the name of the town.
I'm at a loss. In any case, the headline reads, Clean Energy, Vermont trails only California.
Yeah, this is from the Rutland Herald. When it comes to clean energy, Vermont is second only to California, according to a nationwide assessment of states by the Union of Concerned Scientists. Vermont came in at the top in 2 of the 12 categories used in the study, including the per capita creation of jobs in clean energy economy and the state's carbon reduction target.
But jobs is going to be a big part of the picture. We're going to be hearing a lot of people, even Trump's talking about jobs.
Well, that I think may have an effect on his attitude
We'll talk
toward
about that
renewable
later.
power. Yeah. Okay, are we done with that?
Well, the takeaway here is the Vermont goal of getting 90% of its energy from renewables by 2050 was one of the most ambitious in the country.
When it was put in.
Yeah, I think they're gonna make it long before that.
I think so. Hawaii's goal I think is 100% by 2045. And I'm surprised that well, I would think that Vermont is trailing Hawaii in that respect. But
well, the good news in Vermont is support for clean energy is bipartisan.
Yes.
That's a good sign.
For the most part. Unfortunately, there are parties who have no support for green energy, and I think they should explain themselves. Anyway, we are up to Saturday, April 22nd, and with an item from the BBC News.
This is interesting. ExxonMobil denied permission to resume Russian oil work.
Now, here is Donald Trump, who has a reputation, or had a reputation, of being kind of pro-Russian. He
Close
said he could deal with Vladimir Putin, and Rex Tillerson, who is the Secretary of State, who apparently is a friend of Putin's, an oil man from ExxonMobil, and Donald Trump is not allowing, well, let me read what it says. Oil giant ExxonMobil will not be allowed to resume drilling in Russia after U.S. President Donald Trump vowed to uphold sanctions. It had been reported that Exxon, the world's largest publicly traded oil company, had sought a dispensation. The U.S. and European Union imposed economic sanctions on Russia in 2014, and that was because they invaded the Ukraine.
Well, they didn't invade Ukraine.
They didn't.
Not technically.
Oh, not technically?
Yeah. Well, they didn't have to in Crimea. They had a plebiscite. And
I'm sorry, they invaded Crimea, but the Crimea was part of the Ukraine.
Oh, yeah, but the Crimean people invited them in. They didn't invade it. they just said, okay, you can come in.
They didn't have resistance from the people who lived in Crimea, and the people who lived in Crimea were mostly Russian, ethnically.
Yeah.
Which was kind of their excuse.
So it's kind of, it's a historical, well, who was it?
Gorbachev
gave Crimea to the Ukrainians? One of the Russian leaders gave, he was from there.
Okay.
I don't know, the Russian leaders kind of blend all at once.
I think Khrushchev was Ukrainian.
Might have been Khrushchev. It was he was born there.
It wasn't Stalin. Stalin was from Georgia.
Stalin, no.
Okay. Should we move on? That was from BBC News, by the way.
We shall move on.
All right. This one comes from the BBC News also.
This is Britain.
Yeah.
The first coal-free day in Britain since the 1880s.
This is impressive. Britain went a full day without using coal to generate electricity for the first time since the Industrial Revolution, National Grid says. Friday, that is the Friday before April 22nd, which is where this comes from, is thought to be and that would have been April 21st, I think, is thought to be the first time the nation has not used coal to generate electricity since the world's first centralized public coal-fired generator opened in 1882 at Holborn Viaduct in London.
Well, according to this article, the government plans to phase out Britain's last coal plants by 2025.
Yeah. Now, does Britain include, I mean, I know that Britain includes England, Wales, and Scotland, but does Britain, the UK includes Northern Ireland, but
but Britain does not. Britain's the island.
Does not. Okay. I had thought that might be the case.
Yeah.
So we're talking about three countries, Wales, England, and Scotland, and in none of those three countries was coal being used to generate power.
On that day.
On that day.
Yep.
Yeah.
Correct.
Okay, and
it probably wasn't being used in Northern Ireland either.
Probably not, yeah. We are up to an item from the Rutland Herald, still on Saturday, April 22nd.
Helping re-energize Vermont.
This is fun.
Yeah.
Members of the Planning Commission in Vernon, Vermont have drawn up a plan called Re-Energizing Vernon. In it, they explore the possibility of a multi-fuel clean energy, affordable microgrid on the site of the closed Vermont Yankee nuclear power plant. Important components would be the 32 megawatt Vernon Dam and some pretty big batteries.
Yeah, well, that's the whole key, is the big batteries.
Yeah.
The dam's been there since 1909.
Yeah.
So I'm glad to see them thinking about this.
Well,
because
they've been thinking hard about this.
They've got that huge infrastructure right there that used to take care of Yankee.
Yeah, and as a matter of fact, the Vermont Yankee plant, when it was first put in, the vision for it was that there would be 2 reactors there.
Yes, correct.
And so there's enough territory, enough land space to hold a second nuclear reactor. Okay. And all of the infrastructure that would be needed to go with that. So there's a lot of space there for developing things without having to worry about getting rid of, decommissioning, fully decommissioning and greenfielding the Vermont Yankee.
Well, a microgrid doesn't necessarily have to have a lot of physical entities to it.
Yes.
The dam is there already, and
Yes.
it's working fine.
Yes.
But microgrids can be in a computer.
Yes. Well, essentially,
It's
yes.
just a matter of garnering resources and allocating them.
Yes, but a microgrid also has to be capable of being switched off from the out.
Yeah, they call that
surrounding
islanded.
grid.
Yeah, it has to be able to stand by itself.
It has to be able to stand, and so there
It's interesting to see them thinking about this, though.
It is indeed, and it's something that I've been trying to work on Brattleboro doing for years.
Yeah,
without
it would make sense here too.
Without a lot of response, but I think eventually, it's just going to happen. We're going to do it
because it's going to be a good idea.
Yeah. Okay, we are up to Sunday, April 23rd, and we have a nice little picture here.
This is interesting.
This is an interesting article. It comes from Clean Technica.
Successful test of the world's first Lilium electric vertical takeoff and land taxi.
Look at that picture.
And if you're looking at that picture, by the way, we're looking at the back of that plane.
We're looking at the back. This is the wings on this thing are kind of reversed from where they are on most aircraft, but those things along the wings, both in the front and the back, that are you can just see them as almost like a row of little black circles with dots, gray dots in the middle. Those are jets.
They're electric jet engines.
They're electric jet engines, which means that they've got a fan inside that pushes air through.
Basically, that's what it is, yep.
Another vertical takeoff and landing aircraft takes to the sky, and this time it was the first successful test flight of the Lilium Electric VTOL vertical takeoff and landing taxi. The Lilium Electric VTOL taxi will have a range of 187 miles and a top speed of 187 miles per hour. You think there's a connection between the two?
That's a little bit faster than the thruway.
Yeah, well, it means you could get from here to Boston in less than an hour.
An hour, yeah. Right.
It would be on demand.
Move around the airline, the terminals in New York in minutes.
In minutes, yeah. It would mean an on-demand, all-electric airway taxi system that would be quiet and free of land-based traffic.
This is really, to me, very futuristic.
Yeah, it looks like something.
Now.
It looks like something from the Jetsons cartoon.
So a couple of quick takeaways about how this works. At takeoff, all flaps, and every one of those engines has a flap, tilt down vertically, and once airborne in a horizontal flight mode, they gradually tilt to the back of the aircraft and apply horizontal thrust.
Yep.
So those engines aren't moving, but they got flaps that are.
Yeah.
This mode of air transportation is claimed to be less than the cost of train fare.
Amazing.
And thus cheaper than taxis as well.
Right.
And they're hoping to reduce travel times by 5.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
And in addition, this is from the article, at least in England, many buildings have rooftop landing areas. They're there already.
They're there already. Elliott Street Apartments could possibly have a rooftop landing area if the building was strong enough to support this thing. And this thing is not heavy, so it might actually
work.
Yeah.
So this is definitely a peek into the future, but it's not too far in the distant future.
Clean Technica has a video of this particular article in Clean Technica, but I would suggest.
You mean if you clicked onto that, you'll see a video?
I would suggest if you're interested in this, probably the thing to do is to do a web search on the Lilium electric taxi, because there are better videos out there that show the thing in operation, in actual operation, not some kind of computer-generated graphic.
Interesting.
Okay, our next item is also from Clean Technica.
U.S. judge sentences Volkswagen to 3 years probation and independent oversight. Can I slap your wrist?
Well, there's more
to it than that.
Volkswagen AG has been sentenced to 3 years probation by a U.S. federal judge in relation to the $4.3 billion diesel emissions cheating scandal. That includes independent oversight of the company. The company released a statement acknowledging fault and saying, quote, Volkswagen today is not the same company it was 19 months ago. Now, one thing about this is, what happens if they violate probation? Do they round up all the employees and throw them in the can?
Some of them they might. 7 current and former Volkswagen execs have been charged by the U.S. Justice Department with various crimes.
Most of them are still in Germany, and Germany will not extradite them.
One of these execs is in U.S. custody, 1 has agreed to cooperate with prosecutors, and 5 appear to be hiding out in Germany.
Now, it's interesting. The one who is in custody in the United States is in custody. In other words, he is in prison, but he doesn't go to trial until I think it's next year. Is that right? No, that can't be right.
I don't know.
He hasn't gone to trial yet.
Yeah.
And he's
sitting there cooling his heels.
He was denied bail.
Yeah.
And the reason was because
he's going to split.
Yeah, they said he was a flight risk because he could go back to Germany and they won't extradite him. So there you have it.
So it's interesting. Well, there's, as part of this particular action, there's a $3 billion criminal fine.
Yeah.
But we're not even seeing all of the lawsuits.
Oh, this is huge.
That are running wild over this.
Over the entire world.
Over the entire world. Exactly.
Any place that there's been a lot of VWs, there's been litigation going on. There's been criminal charges brought. This is a big deal. The people who did this took a risk. They should have known better. They should have known you can't have millions of cars out there without somebody noticing.
Exactly.
And you know,
looking back at it, it's really kind of amazing.
But every single car company has tried to do this.
Have tried to do something similar.
Or at least that's what we had as when this first broke. We had a person who was from the transportation people in Washington. What U.S.
Department of Transportation. Clever name.
Yeah, which it's very unclever of me to forget it. But then I'm the guy who, when he was 13 years old, spent half an hour looking for a pencil he was holding in his left hand.
Okay.
Okay. All right. Let's go on. And now we're up to Impact Alpha, and we have a picture which is altogether too dramatic. It looks like something out of a
That's a good picture, actually.
Romance
I
novel
like that
or
picture.
something. Yeah. Well, it looks a little bit too stunning.
Oil-rich Nigeria moves to boost renewables to 30% by 2030.
From Norway to
That's pretty.
Yeah, it is.
Drastic.
From Norway to the United Arab Emirates and Saudi Arabia, big oil producers are becoming backers of renewable energy. We will have more on that. Now Nigeria has signed 2 agreements with solar developers to guarantee payment risks for 50 megawatts and 70 megawatt solar farms. The oil and gas sector makes up 35% of Nigeria's gross domestic product and 90% of its export. This is a
powerful sector.
In Nigeria, that's what it's all about. They have a lot of oil and a lot of peanuts.
And a lot of people.
Peanuts.
Also a lot of people.
Well, a lot of people. Yeah, well,
Nigeria's 192 million people remain energy poor.
Oh my gosh, 192 million.
Half of the country lacks access to electricity.
Yeah, this is that's why they need these. But you know, my opinion on these African countries is that we should focus on getting everybody a small solar system built with a solar panel and a battery.
Well, we have talked about it here. We've shown pictures of people walking, or people delivering solar panels on the backs of donkeys.
Yeah, absolutely.
And they're doing it themselves.
And
that's street level stuff.
And this is a kind of thing that can have a profound effect on the lives of the people who get those systems.
Oh yeah.
really.
For one
really,
thing, on their health, because they're not going to be
not
burning so much.
Yeah, they're not
in their houses.
Yeah, they're not exposing themselves to the fumes of
cooking in the kitchen.
Or actually, a lot of it is like using kerosene, which is extremely expensive for these people because that has to be brought in on the backs of donkeys too.
Yeah.
And the kerosene lamps have a toxic effect inside. Okay, should we go on?
We should move along.
This is engineering.com. Engineering all in uppercase letters. Not that it really matters.
Houston has no problem with renewable energy.
Many U.S. cities are setting green energy goals. Some, like Chicago, shoot for 100% renewable energy by the year 2025. Wow. Further south, Houston says we have no problem with nearly 90% of the municipal electricity sector are already being generated by renewable sources. Part of that comes from a recently built Solar Holman plant.
It's a big plant.
Big plant.
It's covering 360 acres.
Yep.
And it contains more than 200,000 tracking solar panels.
Tracking panels.
Yeah.
Which means that they're getting about...
They follow the sun.
Yeah, they're getting about 25%, 30% more than
more
a stationary.
energy than a fixed one.
Yeah. So
this PV farm, according to this, could generate nearly 80 gigawatt hours of energy per year.
That's a fair amount.
Covering roughly 10% of Houston's municipal electricity needs.
That'd keep a lot of toasters running.
I would say.
Yeah.
I would say.
Okay.
Water coolers, too.
Water coolers, too. Both at the same time. PV Magazine USA supplied us with the next piece.
Breaking new ground. Now, this is a long article, and it's a good read. This is very interesting.
Yep. Affluent countries like Germany and Japan are typically the ones associated with renewables. But the nation with the highest portion of solar generation in its electricity mix last year was not affluent. It was Honduras, a nation of 8 million people and a gross domestic product of only $5,000 per capita and serious social problems.
There's a quick takeaway here. From the article, Central American nations have emerged from obscurity to a leading role in the deployment and integration of large amounts of renewable energy.
Yeah.
But the energy transition in this region is just beginning.
Just beginning. Well, it's truthfully, it's just beginning worldwide.
That's true.
Except for a couple of places. I mean, Costa Rica has got a lot of renewable power.
They got a lot of hydro.
They got a lot of hydro. Yeah, but you know, before Germany got into the Energiewende, the Albania was getting 100% of its electric from renewable power because everything came from hydro.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, we're up to Tuesday, April 25th, and we have a picture here.
Yeah, let me get the picture.
It reminds me of the complaint that I always have, which is I don't like mummy movies because I don't like deserts. And I always see pictures, you know, of Arizona highways, and I think, man, those photographs are so beautiful. I'm so glad I'm not there.
Well, the headline here is an interesting one. Lizards, honey, and 754 megawatts behind America's largest solar project.
Yeah.
The Americas.
America's largest solar project. Remember, Mexico is...
the Americas, yeah.
Yeah, the Americas. And if you tell a Mexican you're an American, you're likely to wind up...
well, you get trouble with that even in Canada. We're Americans too.
Yeah, that's right.
Absolutely.
Mexico will soon have a starring solar project, the largest in the entire Americas. Mexico will be outdoing the United States in terms of the largest solar project, showing off new leading role in renewables. Thank you, Donald Trump. Maybe you should pay attention. Driven by a renewable energy market reform, and maybe they'll be bringing Americans to Mexico to work on this thing. Italian power giant Enel is set to develop a record 754 megawatt project, adding to the largest solar plants completed or under construction in both Chile and Brazil. And by the way, the Mexicans do not want U.S. workers who have been convicted of crimes. They don't want Americans the people we call Americans down there who are criminals, because they're undesirable.
That's interesting.
Well, you know.
This is also interesting. You're going to need more than 1,200 workers for several months to build this thing.
Yeah.
This is big.
This is big. This is, by the way, in PV Tech. And our next item is from Sustainable Brands.
Renewable energy job opportunities are booming in the U.S.
If anyone doubts renewable...
Apparently they're booming in Mexico, too.
Yeah, they are. If anyone doubts renewable energy is the future, they need only to look at job numbers. According to a recent report from the Environmental Defense Fund, which is people refer to as the EDF, employers in the renewable sector are hiring people 12 times as fast as the rest of the economy. Within the sector, small businesses dominate with 70% of the jobs. And, you know, we had that wonderful video, which I want to put up at some point on the show.
Yeah, we've talked about it.
Showing a young woman whose name is, I think it's Jessica Kilroy. It was on the Weather Channel.
Hanging from the wire.
Yeah, she's 35 stories up in the air, hanging there, grinding away on the blade of a wind turbine, and obviously loves her job. And those wind turbine tech jobs, on average, are paying upwards of $50,000 a year.
Well, that's what I was just about to say. There's a quick takeaway here. The number of solar and wind-related jobs has grown at a rate of 20% annually since 2011.
Yeah.
That ain't hay.
No, it's not.
Okay,
and these are jobs
Wind
that pay
turbine
well.
technician is the fastest growing profession in the United States.
Yep.
They're not low-paying jobs, as we have mentioned.
Yep.
Wind turbine technician job pays $45,000 on the average.
45.
Yeah.
Because I had read 51.
Well, depends on what
Okay,
week you're reading it.
I suppose it does.
And the other technician jobs aren't hay either. They're paying almost 40.
Yeah, and you know, I've read stories. I read a story about a young woman who had been in trouble with the law, and had been in prison, and she came out of prison and got training in I think it was the solar industry. All of a sudden, for the first time in her life, she had regular employment. Mm-hmm. And she was able to do the things that she wanted to do, didn't have to commit crimes to stay alive, got her sister, who was in the same kind of position, also doing the same thing. There's a lot of benefit to be had from this kind of thing.
For those who are of the right age here that are watching this show, there's a lot of opportunities.
There's a lot of opportunities. Okay, our next item is from The Guardian, and we have a relatively impertinent
we got a picture of this
going on here.
Let me get that picture
Something that
up.
really doesn't have anything to do with anything in The Guardian, but there it is. It came with the article, which is why it's included.
What does it say there? By 2040, wind and solar would account for 45% of the global power mix.
Yeah, that's what it says.
That's what it says.
Got a title?
Tory wind farm policy endangers cheap energy in the UK.
A Shell-sponsored group. This is sponsored by Royal Dutch Shell.
Which is interesting.
Interesting in itself. And it's not just Royal Dutch Shell that's involved in this. There's other fossil fuel companies that are engaging in this. This group says wind is increasingly the cheapest form of electricity. Conservative opposition to wind farms risks the UK missing out on one of the cheapest sources of electricity, according to the head of a Shell-funded industry group. This is from The Guardian. And by the way,
this is reality. The cost of wind power has fallen 60% in the last 5 years.
Yeah, and this
By
is
2035, wind and solar could provide 98% of the power in developed countries such as Germany and the UK.
Yep, and this is on April 25th, if you want to find it. The interesting thing here to me is the fact that this is fossil fuel companies that are saying this.
They're saying it.
They're just saying it right out.
They're looking at, what would you call it, the writing on the wall.
They are. Well, we talked in our last show about DONG, Danish Oil and Natural Gas acronym,
which is now Danish wind farms.
Yeah, it's like they don't deal with fossil fuels anymore. Okay, we are up to Wednesday, April 26th, and this is yesterday's news from our point of view right now.
Trump to order oil drilling study off the California coast.
Okay, this is from Bloomberg. President Donald Trump will order the Interior Department to review locations for offshore oil and gas exploration and considering selling drilling rights in territory that former President Barack Obama put off limits, according to people briefed on the matter who spoke on the condition of an anonymity before it was issued. And frankly, I find this disturbing.
Well, yeah. I think he's just playing games. There's a lot of opposition on the West Coast to offshore drilling.
Yeah.
Because I forget what year it was, way back, 1969, they had a disaster out there, and for a whole summer, I think nobody could use the beaches. Well, there was oil all over the place.
Yeah, there's a lot of reasons not to do this, and California is a particularly difficult place. For drilling for oil. Actually, the whole West Coast is difficult because there's no continental shelf there to speak of.
No.
So you can't just anchor a drilling rig and expect it to be, there's no foundation.
There are solutions to that. There are floating rigs. We've talked about them, but the East Coast doesn't have that.
Yes.
And I foresee a lot of wind farms being developed on the East Coast.
Oh, absolutely.
Just because you got to make money.
Yeah, but the thing is that what Donald Trump is doing here is not just the Interior Department offshore oil and gas. He's having oil and gas exploration and so forth allowed in national monuments.
Yeah, and it's politics.
It
politics. Really is. It's corporate interests and politics, and
It's going to be interesting to see where this goes, because I think there's going to be a lot of opposition among ordinary people in the United States to the idea that,
you got to go to. They're going to rename the Yellowstone National Park be the ExxonMobil National Park.
Well, there's a point at which you have to say, okay, how are we going to do this? He's undoing things that were done by Theodore Roosevelt and Richard Nixon and Ronald Reagan and George W. Bush.
Yeah.
These are people, obviously, and Bill Clinton and Barack Obama, but
I don't think he's thinking these things through. He's shooting from the hip.
He's shooting from the hip, which is what he appears to be doing, and almost all the time, and this is what he has. I think he came into the White House saying, all we need to do here is have to have the economy function properly is to have somebody who is going to, I'm going to put up the proper picture for this. Sorry about that.
Well, this is the next article. That's just exactly what we're going to be talking about.
Yeah.
Is Trump warming to wind power?
Yeah. What he's been doing has been shooting from the hip, saying we need a decisive president in order to put the economy back on track. Well, I'm sorry, the economy already was growing, and the things that he's advocating for are obsolete. So, is that really what we want? Should we go on to the next piece?
You haven't even read that one yet, have you?
Trump's
position on wind?
Yeah. I read that. That was from Bloomberg.
No, from Workboat.
I have not read the one from Workboat.
That's what we're on now.
Yes, that's right.
Is Trump warming to wind power?
That's right. Trump's position on wind may be shifting. This is the article that goes with that particular picture.
Right.
During the election, the narrative on wind was not looking good. Trump promised a national energy policy that prioritized domestic fossil fuels over renewables. But the narrative seems to be shifting. And the biggest game changer for Trump seems to be jobs. Now, we were talking about jobs in renewable energy, and particularly wind power, just a moment ago.
Well, we said the average pay was $45,000.
Yeah.
This article corrects you, or it says what you were saying. The median pay in 2016 was $52,260.
Yeah, median versus average.
They're not exactly the same thing.
They're not exactly the same, and what that would imply is that there are a number of jobs in wind power that are actually not very high paying.
Yeah.
That's how you would drive the average down below the median. But nevertheless, if you start with those jobs,
that's about $25 an hour. That ain't hay.
No, it's not.
There aren't too many people in Brattleboro making $25 an hour.
Probably not. And excuse me, it was interesting to me that this particular article came from a publication called Workboat.
Workboat. Which is what we see there, that thing on stilts there.
That is
the Workboat.
That is Brave Tern. And Brave Tern is a full-sized, honest-to-goodness ship.
We've talked about it. We had pictures of that
We've
before.
had other pictures of it. This is working
People live on it.
Yep. Yeah. Deepwater Wind Project. You can see the bridge of it just to the right of the mast of the wind turbine that it's working on. It's
designed to do exactly what it's doing right now.
Yeah, exactly. And it's up on jacks. They take the ship out, and they have 4 jacks, and they lower the jacks and rise.
Goes the ship.
Up goes the ship. They want
and it's steady.
And it's steady.
Yep.
That's the big deal. They want it to be steady so they can lift the components of the wind turbine, which are carried on the ship, onto the foundations that are out there at sea. This is the Deepwater Wind Project at Block Island and off the coast of Rhode Island.
Is that what this picture is?
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. And I don't know. I mean, there's a lot of the people who are being hired for wind power in the United States include dock workers and welders who work in shipyards and a lot of this stuff.
And the factories are popping up to build the components.
Yes.
So you got more.
And I mean, Nebraska.
There's a multiplier effect here.
Yeah, there is. Nebraska has wind turbines, but it's also got factories that manufacture the components for the wind turbines.
Exactly.
So, this is a matter of things being brought to bear, providing people with jobs, providing industries. And one thing, if you don't mind, I'd like to mention something, and that is the size of the wind turbine industry. Okay.
Okay.
I went to a.
We got time. We're running ahead.
We are a little ahead of schedule here. I went to a meeting, and somebody was talking about big wind. This was about 2 years ago, a year and a half ago.
Sounds bad.
It sounds bad. Big wind sounds bad. And I thought, who is big wind? And I went home, and I started finding out who are the big wind turbine manufacturers.
GE's one of them.
Yeah, but it's not the biggest, and it's not the second biggest.
They're not. No. Okay.
Okay.
And they're making most of their stuff in France.
Yeah, but the biggest wind turbine manufacturer in the world, the title for that place has been shifting back and forth between 2 companies.
Okay.
Do you know the names of them?
No.
Okay. Do you recognize the name Goldwind?
No.
You can guess from the name that it would be a Chinese company.
You might think, yeah.
Yeah, it is a Chinese company.
Yeah.
Goldwind is kind of in a competition with another company called Vestas.
Okay,
All
I've
right?
heard of them.
Vestas is a Danish company. It's depending upon what week it is, it's the largest or the second largest wind turbine manufacturer in the world.
And they're the ones that have been building them all for the North Sea.
Yeah, and well, there's other companies too, but those 2 companies between them have about a quarter of the wind turbine industry in terms of revenues. So I was thinking, okay, what is this? How does this compare? So first of all, I looked at the wind turbine industry, and I found that the entire industry's revenues in sale of wind turbines is about $95 billion a year, which sounds like a lot of money. The people in
To me it does.
Yeah, Vermont could have a heck of a party for $95 billion. We could keep going for over a year. But nevertheless, is that a lot of money? That's a question. But if you put all of the wind turbine manufacturers into one company that did nothing else, that company's revenues would be under $100 billion a year. Now, if you go to Wikipedia, sorry, I've got this problem in my throat. If you go to Wikipedia, and there's an article there called List of Largest Companies by Revenue. And I went to that article in September of 2015. And you can actually go into Wikipedia, if you know how, you can find the specific version of that article that I was looking at. The article is updated, I think, more often than once a day. It just goes through really fast. Mm-hmm. But in 2015, there were 63 companies on the list. In order to be on the list, you had to have revenues in excess of $100 billion.
Pretty exclusive list.
Which means that you had to have revenues that were in excess of the entire wind turbine industry, which would not make it onto that list.
Yeah.
So who's on the list? Koch Industries.
Okay.
And 21 companies that are in the oil and gas sector.
Is that so?
So out of that list,
slant on things.
Yeah, it sure does. Out of that list of 63 companies, 22 of them were dependent on fossil fuels. And their revenues combined came to just about double the budget of the U.S. federal government. Do you suppose? And
you're talking about, when you say big, you really mean big, don't you?
This is big.
Yeah.
And these people are scared to death because they've seen coal. There was not a single coal company on that list. Coal has just fallen off a cliff in terms of the market value. It's a zombie. The coal index that they used to have has only got one company on it. They used to have a coal index that was worth, they priced at 750 or 720 or something like that. Now it's about 35.
Didn't we talk about the CEO of that coal company last week?
We may have.
Yeah, I think we did, yeah.
But the oil and gas sector, okay, that a year and a half ago there were 21 companies out of 63 on that list.
Yeah.
Right now, the last time I looked at the list, which was about 2 days ago, there were 52 companies on the list instead of 63, and the number of oil and gas companies had dropped from 21 to 7.
Wow.
And those 7 had seen at least 30%, but up to 37% reduction in their revenues in the last year.
Times are changing.
Times are changing, and these people are worried.
I would
and they've
imagine
got the UN saying, oh, and by the way, you're going to have to go out of business in the next 30 or so years. But in order to do that, they're going to have to reduce the size of their business by about $3 billion a year.
Yeah.
And what do they want to do? Well, they want to prevent wind farms from going up because wind is competition.
They're invested in oil and gas. They want to sell it.
They want to sell that gas. That's exactly right. They don't want wind power. They don't want utility scale solar either.
Not at all.
And they're going to put whatever money it takes into preventing that from happening, except there are a few companies that don't do that. And Shell happens to be one that is a little bit more reluctant than the others to say, no, there's no problem.
Well, right here in Vermont, something like that is going on around wind power.
Yeah.
The Public Service Board or the Public Service group there is holding hearings on exactly that.
Yes.
And then somebody has proposed a new standard of sound.
Yes.
We're talking
37 decibels. 37. Would you like to hear 37 decibels? 37 decibels is quieter than most people's kitchens.
Exactly.
When there's no traffic outdoors.
Well, my sound meter doesn't register below 40. I can sit in my room.
What is this all about? What it's all about is we don't want wind power.
That's exactly what. It's not about quiet windmills. It's about no windmills.
Yeah, that's right. And who is funding this? Somebody's funding it. Somebody put $895 million into the last federal election because they wanted to make sure that the socialists weren't. They wanted to make sure that they controlled the Congress. And by golly, they got control of the Congress. Okay, we have to go on because we've only got.
This is our last item.
Yeah.
Per the Energy Secretary, U.S. should stay in the climate accord. This is interesting because of who's saying it.
This is from BOE report. U.S. Energy Secretary Rick Perry said the U.S. should...
Who's an oil man.
Who is an oil man and former governor of Texas, said the U.S. should renegotiate the Paris Accord. Got news for you, Rick. It ain't going to happen. on climate change instead of abandoning it, while criticizing Germany for allowing its fossil fuel emissions to rise. He's criticizing Germany because the fossil fuel emissions rose. The remarks put Perry among a group of advisors urging President Donald Trump to stick with the United Nations Accord that he vowed to scrap.
So this is very interesting.
Thank you, Ivanka.
Yeah, this is very interesting development here.
Yes, it is. And honestly, I never thought that he was going to scrap that, that he was going to cancel the accord. It's just too expensive.
It plays well in Peoria.
It plays well in
that's what it's about,
West
really.
Virginia and Kentucky. Yeah. But somebody's going to be mad as blazes at Donald Trump.
Very interesting.
Have a great week, everybody.